thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon. We've got over 50 people in the webinar today. So welcome everyone. This is the first of our CoStar Network webinars, and we're going to have two presentations today. The first one about co-benefit solutions for resilient coasts by Marta and Elina, and then a second presentation about ocean literacy strategies for engaging communities in England and Wales from Emma. So we're going to get into those presentations in just a minute, but since this is the first of the webinars, I'm just going to do a couple of announcements and tell you a little bit about the CoStar Network. So CoStar Network, what that stands for is Coastal Communities and Seas Together for Resilience, and that makes up the CoStar Network. And what we're about is making an inclusive and collaborative community of practice to work and build knowledge, action and resilience for UK coastal communities and seas. Now, I know a lot of you are already signed up to our mailing list, which is available at costar@hull.ac.uk. So if you aren't already a member, or you've joined this and want to receive all of our emails, make sure that you've signed up with us there. A lot of people asked to sign up from in the process of signing up for this webinar, and we'll be adding you to that mailing list, so you'll receive more information about what we do. So these webinars are one part of trying to build that community of practice. We want to sort of be able to provide a space to share what's going on with coastal communities and how we can all work together to build greater resilience. One other thing we'd just like to advertise today, which some of you will have seen in the newsletter, is that we are having our second large event, so the network event in Glasgow, which will take place in September on the 11th and 12th, the Thursday and Friday. Booking for that will open soon, and you'll see more about that in our newsletters. But also we've got a particular ask out. If you've got successful projects that you'd like to include as part of our dialogues process or in problem-solving laboratories, then please get in touch with the team at Glasgow, Coastal Adaptation at glasgow.ac.uk. And again, information about that's in our newsletter. So there are a couple of quick adverts and also some time for everybody to join, because we know that quite a lot of people have signed up to come to the webinar. So we just wanted to make sure that everybody was able to join. And I see there are lots of you out there. We are now going to start with the first presentation. So Marta Meschini from the University of Liverpool and Elina Apine from the University of St Andrews are going to talk to us about co-benefit solutions for resilient coasts. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and seamlessly it will pass over to Marta Meschini and Elina Apine. Now, just to let everybody know, we're also recording the full set of presentations as well, so they will be available for people to see afterwards. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and pass over to Marta.
Good afternoon. We're going to talk about the work that we've done as part of CORPT. And yeah, as Stuart mentioned, we are part of the CORPT Resilient Coast Optimizing Co-Benefit Solutions project, which is one of 6 projects under the SMMR Sustainable Management of UK Marine Resources Programme. And we are looking specifically at the coasts. And Matt, if you could go to the next slide, please. The aim of
I'm really trying to, but it's not working. Sorry, just a sec.
The aim of the project, hopefully it will be resolved quickly, is to explore how we could support the transition from sort of more hard engineered solutions at the coast to softer green solutions, so nature-based solutions at the coast for coastal and flood risk management. And it's a large interdisciplinary project, and it is a collaboration between various universities. So University of Liverpool, University of St Andrews, as you can see now, National Oceanography Centre, and Cranfield University, but we also work with closely work with the practitioners and community, so sort of going a bit more at transdisciplinary, cross-sectorial approach. And we have 4 case study sites, 2 in Scotland, Earthon and St Andrews, Pensarn in Wales, and Heskett Bank in England. And all these sites are quite different, so ranging from Shingle Beach in Pensarn to sand dunes and salt marsh in St Andrews, and also more estuarine landscapes in Earth and Heskett Bank. And you can see on the right the structure of our project, but today I'm going to be talking about the sort of the 2 work packages. Where are we now? So the work that we've been doing, understanding how we have gotten to the point and what are we doing right now, and also where are we going next and how we could actually get there, and how we can make locally led and adaptive decisions. So I'm going to be talking about a few of the things. As you notice, it's a big project and there's many other studies, but that would take me more than an hour to talk. But some of the work that has led to actually the DIPSIA Plus framework that Marta will be talking about later is, first of all, we have done historical framework. So that helped us to understand what has happened in these sites. So by reviewing academic and grey literature and archive materials that have given this overview of the historical and geographical context and changes over time. At the bottom, you can see some of the references, but we will also show the link to all the outputs at the end. The next work that has been very important is the work on social acceptance. That's social acceptance is attitude or behavior towards coastal schemes, and we've been trying to understand what influences the acceptance of nature-based solutions for coastal flood protection. So we use mixed methods approach to sort of really look into that, and social acceptance also has different levels. So general socio-political acceptance and community acceptance, which is this more localized, and it's very complex. And as you can see in the triangle B, it's influenced by the scheme itself, of how effective it might be perceived, but also individual values, knowledge, and experience of flooding, for example. Then the third really important component has been work on soft systems methodology. Soft systems methodology is something that acknowledges that the real world is actually complex and messy, but it's still useful to actually think about it as a system and understand what could be done to find the ways to improve the system. And it builds on systems thinking, and it usually has a set of 7 collaborative exercises, and we have used it for sort of UK-wide study, but also for DIPSIA, we specifically use one of the steps, which is describing route definition, so trying to understand who's involved in a system, who's affected, and what the system is trying to do. So having all this work, we were then thinking how we could actually create something that would help us to decide what would be the best way, best options for coastal management, and broadly, or for kind of specifically flood risk management. And we thought that DIPSIA, Driver Pressure State Impact Response Framework, offers already quite structured view, and it allows us to look at these cause-effect relationships between human natural systems, given that we have systems approach throughout this project. And it has also had various modifications and coupling with other concepts, but we found that it doesn't necessarily work with what we have, and also it has received criticism that it lacks precision for the terms used. And yeah, so we have this, but we also used activities. That is a element from framework usually suggested by Eliot. So yeah, so then we thought we're going to sort of enhance the DIPSIR framework, and we will add temporal dynamics, because we thought it's missing that sort of change over time aspect. Then we also wanted to include social acceptance, because we know that it plays an essential role in actually practically implementing coastal schemes. And while there is some exogenous pressures in the framework, there is not enough of this systems context, and we took worldview from subsystems methodology, but also widely used in other frameworks as well. And that's how we got into the DIPSIR Plus framework, which you can see evolves over time. There's several loops. So the responses don't go back to the same loop, but actually go to a new loop. And yes, and now I will hand it over to Marta, who's going to talk a bit more about how we actually tried and tested the DIPSIR Plus.
Thanks, Elina. Thank you for setting the scene so well to speak about how we tested this DIPSIR Plus framework. So first of all, the reason why we wanted to test it in a real case study was that we want this framework to be a practical tool that could be used, as already mentioned by Elina, in coastal decision making, or in general, actually, in environmental management. So now I want to give you a bit of overview about the case studies that we choose. That is Eskethon Marsh, is here in the Ribble Estuary, northwest of England. And we identified these four main historical phases because it used to be a salt marsh area in the Ribble Estuary prior to 1980s, and then was reclaimed for agricultural purposes, as you can see in here, until 2006, when the first half, that is this blue area that you can see in here, that is the Eskethon Marsh West area, was reconverted from agricultural land to salt marshes. And then between 2014 and 2017, also the east side was reconverted into salt marshes. And this is how it looks today, Eskethon Marsh, with farmlands just on the back. So with these four historical moments that I just introduced to you, we took all the information we collected using the different methodology that Elina mentioned, and we tried to basically insert all of this information under each component of the DIPSIR Plus framework. So, for example, you can see here a timeline in which we highlighted some historical moment or some policies that were relevant to coastal decision making. And then, again, we inserted this information for each loop. And the main idea of this DIPSIR Plus, as Elina mentioned, is that it's a flow. So by the time the system, by the time you have some responses, basically the system is already changed. And so you would jump into the next loop. And in this way, we would be able to learn from the past to understand why the current situation is like it is now, and probably the past and the present are a good place to start to take decisions from the future. But all of this was, let's say, our exercise based on the information that we were able to collect within the project. But then we wanted to go a bit further and to actually engage with stakeholders, because we think that local knowledge is fundamental in this kind of decision-making process. So we focused on the current situation in Esketham Marsh, and we organized a workshop at the Esketh Bank Community Center. And the aim was to create a shared understanding of how is the situation, the current situation in Esketham Marsh, to identify challenges and hopefully to identify next steps and actions needed to address these challenges. The reason why we wanted to organize this workshop is that during previous activities, results basically showed that there are some issues related to this rebuilt Sole Marsh area, and to what Lina was saying about the perceived effectiveness of this coastal management procedure. The way in which we wanted to do it was, of course, using DeepSeer Plus, because we wanted to test if it could be used in a practical way for more inclusive and equitable decision-making. So we engaged with representatives from Natural England, RSPB, local authorities, our Future Coast Project, landowners and farmers, and environmental agency, together with researchers. And we put all of us into the same room. And during the workshop, we had these four main moments, let's say four main activities. The first one was about setting the context, and we did it from a co-opt point of view, from a project point of view, to set the scene about coastal modeling, house prices, social acceptance, blue carbon, potential cost-benefit analysis for Esketham Marsh that were already, these analyses were already performed within the project. The second step for the workshop was to pair each participant with one of us, one of co-opt researcher, to develop a DeepSeer Plus framework related to their vision of the current challenges in the area. And it's not only about that piece of land, it's about also the system around. And then the third step, we actually asked to physically take the post-it the participants used to create their group DeepSeer into a shared DeepSeer Plus, so that we ended up with this map that was created based on inputs from all participants. And then the fourth step was a conversation in which we asked participants to share their thoughts about the process and to facilitate basically others to understand their perception of that system. So as a result, you can see in here, we had these 9 DeepSeer Plus framework that were the result of groups work. And then this is the shared DeepSeer framework, DeepSeer Plus, sorry, framework, made by the input from everyone. So now I want to share some practical examples for each component that it also relates to some of the lessons that we learned through this process. And then I will zoom out again to, let's say, speak about how this framework could be used in the future. So some of the main drivers that were identified by participants, for example, were the supermarket pricing, the low-cost food and reduction workforce post-Brexit, as well as increased rainfall and extreme events and policies such as net gain and net zero, as well as housing crisis and house development. Some of the pressures are the lack of maintenance of main rivers and water courses and outfalls, and the pressure on the drainage system due to the housing development that is happening a bit further down, but is actually leading to overflow and overcapacity of the drainage system in that area. About the state, they are experiencing siltation of outfalls, and there is an issue related to responsibilities regarding flood risk management in the area because they are fragmented and not always clear. The impact of all of this is that farmlands are experiencing flooding, and there is wildlife disturbance, and there is an increased flood experience and managerial alignment. So this reconversion from agricultural land to soil marsh is not perceived as effective in the current state. And this also led to a decline in public trust in management efforts. The responses, some of the responses that were identified during the workshop were the need to recognize the importance of farmland for regional and national food security, as well as the need to switch from a sector field-based approach to a more system-based approach, as well as the need for improved governance, enhanced collaboration among stakeholders. And just to mention, but basically during the workshop, it was the first time in which all these different stakeholders were all together in the same room. There is also the need for better public engagement and increased funding for flood protection, and wastewater treatment initiatives. From a social acceptance point of view, participants highlighted that there are misperceptions about nature-based solutions and the efficiency for flood protection, as it was, as Elina mentioned earlier. And in some cases, there is communities' reluctance to engage due to negative past experiences. And from a worldview point of view, the current funding scheme and planning processes do not effectively support the implementation of nature-based solution, also due to the lack of long-term funding, for example, to address the maintenance issue. And there is a desire to shift from towards a worldview that would more meaningfully involve communities in the decision-making process. So now I always like this slide that is so what. So we talked a lot what we want to say. I think that this picture is a fair summary of what we want to say, that is taken from The Blind Man and the Elephant, a poem by John Geoffrey Saxe. And because basically we all have different perceptions of the same system that are based on our background, our experience, our job role. And this is why there is the need to engage different stakeholders, including communities, and to include also the local knowledge into the decision-making process, to be able to have the more, let's say, clear and complete picture of the situation, and to be able to find the most efficient solution possible. And this is why we think that DeepSeed Plus could be a practical tool to enable this more inclusive and locally led decision-making process. And now, if you want to know more about the ESCAF workshop, you can find the report there on the left side, and you can find all the other projects outputs on the other QR code. Stay tuned, because we are about to submit the paper about DeepSeed Plus as well. And with this, we want to thank you for listening, and thanks the organizer for organizing this webinar.
Great. Thank you very much, Elina and Marta. That was fabulous, and thank you for starting off our webinar series as well. It's great to have your presentation. Got the opportunity now for people to ask some questions. Now, you can either do that in the Q&A by typing it in, or in theory, potentially raising your hand. We'll see how well that works. I'm sure that's provoked a lot of interest. Perhaps whilst people are writing. Was that there were some people put some comments to me before, actually, things that they wanted to know about. And I wondered, you did mention having an inclusive decision-making process. And one of the questions we got asked beforehand was how did you enable those people? You brought lots of people in with different values into the same room to discuss things, and how did you manage to get them all to work together? Was that a difficult thing, or was it an easy process?
So maybe I can have a first go, and then Elina can build on that, because actually she did most of the work, for example, for communities and building that trust that enabled actually this process to happen, I think. So in the room, as you can imagine, looking at who was there at the beginning of the day, it was quite challenging, let's say, because, for example, it was the first time in which farmers were in the same room with Environment Agency and Natural England and all of that. But it was actually a really positive discussion, meaning that they were able to ask some questions and receive some very precise answers that, in my opinion, helped them to, I mean, of course, not to accept, but at least to understand why some aspects are as they are. I don't know, Elina, if you want to add.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that actually one of the feedback from HESCET, but also other case study sites, is that actually these meetings do offer quite neutral space, because we're not representing sort of decision-making organizations. So actually it helps because we're coming with at least trying to have less biased views. So actually this helps them to, like Marta was mentioning, listen to each other. We still think that, you know, that there could have been more people, and that's again another feedback that we received, that maybe some voices were missing. So in the future, definitely trying to get that as well. But generally, it has been quite good to have these spaces that are not organized by, for example, Environment Agency, but more sort of neutral academic project.
Yeah. That's good, thank you. Then one other thing I was just wondering, so you obviously use the DIPSIR approach and looking at that historically over time and how it changed. I was wondering if from that, could you understand what the biggest cause was for the change in response that you saw? Because there were quite different responses. What can you sort of work out over time? Well, what was how you know, what changed to cause those modifications in response?
So I think
We've lost your sound.
Now?
Yes.
Sorry about that. I don't know. Today, all the IT issues are coming out. I don't know why. It was just a bit of suspense, actually, about my answer. So now, actually, the first bit, so the land reclamation, we think it was probably related to some subsidies benefit in that historical moment, that was 1980s, that farmers had for agricultural lands. But then the worldview, let's say, started to change. So, for example, in 2006, what made possible managerial alignment to happen, so to reconvert the agricultural land into soil marshes, was that it was not even yet a nature-based solutions, or so-called a nature-based solution. It was actually habitat compensation for some coastal defenses that were built in Morecambe Bay, a bit north, and they basically needed to compensate for habitat loss in there. And so some funding became available into the Ribble estuary, as well as the work that RSPB was already doing in the area for the importance of the area for as a natural reserve and as a bird conservation area. And then again into 2014, when was the second, let's say, reconversion of agricultural land into salt marsh. Again, it was another partnership that put their funding to reconvert the land. But again, it was probably just a coincidence of several policies as well as the right funders and people. I would say.
New posts, click on new posts. Every time you get that, I've already answered that one. The other one, as well.
Great, thank you. Sorry, and we got some other questions come up online. I'll try to ask, I think, one more of those. So, yeah, one question was that the DIPSA approach, is familiar to people, but did you look at more recent iterations of it? So there's a DIPSWRM, if that's the right way of saying the acronym, socio-ecological systems, etc. And could you say anything about how you incorporated soft systems?
Yes, I can start now, and then Marta can add. Yes, we did look at DIPSWRM indeed, and other sort of iterations, I think one of because DIPSA is, as mentioned, quite an old and well used, but also been adapted and been modified. So it feels like it has potential to actually evolve. So we used it as a sort of basis, but then we wanted to add these other elements to it. In terms of subsystems methodology, we used it more to actually frame and structure the responses going into the DIPSA Plus. So it was used to, with historical framework, we found out who was involved, but we wanted to create these root definitions, and so there's different mnemonics and subsystems methodology that can be quite complex, but really helped us to then really structure who's involved and how we can move that in. So it's kind of like interim step for DIPSA Plus. Yeah, Marta, if there's anything you'd like to add, we can always respond by email if needed as well. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you. There are a couple of other questions in the Q&A, but as you say, we'll let you can maybe write a written response into the Q&A for that, because we're now going to move on to the next presentation. But once again, thank you very much. I can give an applause with sound, but thank you very much for your presentation. That was excellent and a brilliant start to the webinar series. So next we're going to move on to presentation by Emma McKinley from Cardiff University, and she's going to be talking to us about ocean literacy strategies for engaging communities in England and Wales. So I will stop sharing my screen there and hand over to Emma, and hopefully it will be seamless.
Oh, no pressure. Hang on one second. Relatively seamless, I hope.
Yeah.
Just thinking about it. There we go. A minute. Hi, everybody. Hopefully you can see my slides. Let me try and move this annoying bar for you. There you go. Thank you so much, Stuart, for the introduction. As you said, my name's Emma McKinley. I'm a senior research fellow at Cardiff University, and I'm one of the partners on the TRACK project, so one of the CoStar network and the REX project. But I'm actually going to talk to you today about some of the work that I've been doing through the Diverse Marine Values project, which has been run through the SMMR programme, which, as many of you will know, is coming to an end this year. Ocean literacy, as I'm sure many of you are familiar with, is one of the underpinning themes of the REC's programme to enhance ocean literacy across resilient coastal communities, and that's been of my area of work for quite a long time. And so today I'll be talking to you about some of the work that's been happening in Wales and England to develop ocean literacy strategies for engaging coastal communities. Oh, hang on, the slides didn't want to move. There we go. So to start with, like I said, bring us to the ocean decade, which I'm sure we're all very familiar with. And the reason to do that is because ocean literacy isn't a new concept. It's been around for just over 20 years, but the ocean decades launched in 2021, and the kind of implementation plan that went before that really positioned ocean literacy and this recognition of ocean science as being broader than natural sciences, and the need to bring in people into the conversation. So integrating natural and social sciences, bringing in local Indigenous knowledges and values into the conversation has really positioned ocean literacy as a mechanism for change within the ocean decade. And what that has meant has been this real increase in the last 5 years or so in interest and momentum behind ocean literacy as a concept. As a result, it's moved on quite significantly from where it started in 2004. And I'm going to give you a very whistle-stop tour to the evolution of ocean literacy over the last 20 years, so bear with me. But thinking about the decade that we're in, so we're halfway through, one of the things that we've seen and that you may be familiar with are our 10 decadal challenges. So we've seen and we see existing efforts to address each of these 10 challenges by the end of the ocean decade in 2030. But as we are at this midpoint, what we've seen is this real recognition of challenge 10. So what was originally framed as transforming humanity's relationship with the ocean and has been rewritten to be restoring society's relationship with the ocean. There's a recognition that this challenge really underpins all of the other 9 challenges. So that includes things like understanding and beating marine pollution, because that is a people problem. Protecting and restoring ecosystems and biodiversity, that is not an ocean issue, that is a people-driven issue. It is about human behaviour. And so human and ocean relationships, ocean literacy and understanding the complexities of those relationships is really increasingly being recognised as being fundamental to the successful delivery of the other 9 decadal challenges. And ocean literacy is a very big component of that. But what is ocean literacy? What am I talking about? Some of you might be familiar with the concept of ocean literacy. I know I saw some names that I recognise on the participants list, so I know some of you will have seen me talk about this before. Ocean literacy was co-designed by an incredible community of marine educators in the United States in the early 2000s, who recognised that there was a lack of ocean science within the national curriculum. So its roots are very much grounded within formal education, marine education, and very much at a school level. So trying to raise awareness and educate young people from the ages of kindergarten to when they finish high school. That's where we're starting from. That's where it came from. At its very, very simplest, ocean literacy continues to be defined as having an understanding of the ocean's influence on you and your influence on the ocean. There are challenges and there are criticisms about that definition and its ambiguity. I quite like it because it means everything and anything. It can be all-encompassing or it can be very, very specific depending on how it's being applied. Crucially, the work that's been happening around ocean literacy over the last 20 years has been largely grounded in the 7 principles of ocean literacy that you can see on your screen. Again, these were co-designed by the National Marine Educators Association in the US. And you can see that they're very grounded in ocean sciences, really. They're very much about understanding ocean ecosystem processes and oceanographic processes. So understanding the Earth has one big ocean, so you'll hear me refer to ocean rather than oceans. The recognition of the link between ocean weather and climate, that the ocean supports a great diversity of life and ecosystems, and crucially for me as a social scientist, that the ocean and humans are inextricably interconnected. Very, very initially, because of its groundings in education and school-based learning, ocean literacy as a concept was grounded in 3 initial dimensions. And they were that if someone has an understanding of these 7 principles and the 46 fundamental concepts that go underneath those principles, they would have the knowledge of the ocean. So dimension 1 was knowledge. The second dimension was considered to be communication, so that somebody could use that knowledge and communicate effectively with their peers. So dimension 2, communication. And the third dimension, behavior. So that somebody would take that, have that knowledge. Remember, we're talking about young people, students, that they would have the knowledge and they would be able to make responsible decisions about their behavior. And we know that knowledge to behave, the relationship between knowledge and behavior is just not that linear. It had a very dominant knowledge deficit model approach, and over the last 20 years there's been significant recognition that actually it's much more complicated than that. Myself and Daryl Burden, who I think is on the call as well, were commissioned by DEFRA and the Ocean Conservation Trust to look at how fit for purpose the definitions and concepts of ocean literacy were in around 2020, so a few years ago now. We looked at a range of different models, including things like public perceptions research, ocean connectedness, pro-environmental behaviour, social and conservation marketing. And all of this work was used to develop a 10-dimension model, just to make things more complicated for us, to try to recognise the real complexities and some of the things that we thought were perhaps missing from previous considerations of ocean literacy. I'm not going to talk through all of those dimensions now. I could, and I'd be here for a lot longer, but just, I guess, the key thing to recognise is that those initial 3 dimensions that I mentioned, knowledge, behaviour and communication, are still in there. But we propose extending the dimension of knowledge, for example, to include knowledge of maritime careers, knowledge of how to get involved in governance processes. So it's not just about knowledge of the ocean itself. It's broader than that. We included 3 additional dimensions that had been proposed by Brennan et al. In 2019, so attitudes, activism and awareness. And again, crucially, one of the suggestions we made in our paper was that we should also expand some of those dimensions. So, for example, awareness is not just having awareness of the problems or the threats, but also having awareness of the solutions. And then the final 4 dimensions that you can see as you go around clockwise on the circular diagram are those of emotions. Some of you will know that's my favourite word. So emotional connections to the ocean, be they positive, negative or neutral. And I guess one of the challenges for us as an ocean coastal community is to get comfortable with the fact that some people may never have a positive relationship with the ocean. And we have to be all right with that and think about how else we can engage them in ocean topics and make it relevant to them. And that's one of the ways that we're seeing ocean literacy expand and evolve, is to recognise that diversity of relationships. We propose including access and experience, and crucially recognising that access and experience may not be being in, on or underwater, and there are lots of barriers to that access and they need to be accounted for. Adaptive capacity, how able to change and respond to change might communities be, and then trust and transparency. And trust is, as I'm sure you can all recognise, very crucial in a lot of this. The Challenge 10 process that's associated with the Ocean Decade, as I mentioned earlier, has really been working to develop a common vision for this goal of restoring societal relationships with the ocean. Changing the terminology was seen as being really crucial to recognise that actually for some communities, for some people, they've got a really sustainable, healthy, reciprocal relationship with the ocean. And actually they don't need to transform or restore anything. But actually we can restore and learn from we can learn from their relationships and use that to help us restore our relationships where necessary. The other thing that they've done is really move away from, or encourage us to move away from seeing ocean literacy as a process and rather recognise it as being an outcome. Really recognising and remembering that, as I said earlier, that these are not ocean issues. Ocean pollution is not an ocean issue. It's a people problem. It's a people-derived problem. And so really reframing and shifting how we communicate these things and ensuring that we're bringing people into the conversation about how we can co-design solutions, so that in the end, we end up with a society that understands, values and cares for the ocean, but also has the motivation, capability, and that there are opportunities for people to take action. And by people, I don't just mean general public or children or young people. We're talking whole society approaches. And again, that's another shift that we've seen within ocean literacy. It's been this move away from formal education on school-based initiatives and to be about businesses, government bodies, organizations of all types, including society as a whole. Recognizing that information sharing will not be enough alone to change behaviours and to deliver the change that's needed at scale is another really key message from that work. Really what we're trying to say is that everybody is different. we are all influenced by so many different factors. Everybody represented in these photos, all of us on this call right now, our relationship with the ocean, coast and seas will be influenced by so many different factors. And the evolution of ocean literacy is trying to reflect that diversity and complexity. Globally, we're seeing a lot of work to really think strategically about what it means, what ocean literacy means in different contexts, and also where different countries and places are in terms of understanding the level of ocean connection that there is in their places. Canada and the Canadian Ocean Literacy Coalition was the first to launch an ocean literacy strategy in 2021. And since then, there have been a number of different assessments that have been carried out over recent years to start to get that baselining of insight as to where people's relationships with the ocean are in different places, including, crucially, non-coastal communities. So moving away from this idea that we only care about coastal communities when we're talking about ocean and looking further inland as well. Some of this work is being used to develop a global ocean and society survey that is currently live, and we're collecting data at the moment with the hope to present that work at the UN Ocean Conference. So really exciting times within the ocean literacy world. And most excitingly, Brazil has been the first country to mandate ocean literacy into their school curriculum. So there's actually like a legal precedent now that there will be a school curriculum on ocean literacy supported by UNESCO. So there is a lot of stuff happening, a lot of action within ocean literacy right now. And this announcement only happened in the last couple of weeks. Here in the UK, the 10-dimension framework that I talked you through a few minutes ago was used to support the design of an ocean literacy assessment that was carried out first in England and Wales in 2021, and then across all four countries of the UK in 2022. 2021, unsurprisingly, was very, very impacted by COVID restrictions and lockdowns, meaning that people weren't able to give a true representation of their relationships with UK coasts and seas and oceans. So we ran it again in 2022, meaning that we've got data from over 14,000 people across all four countries. The reports for each of the four countries are available online, and if anybody wants me to share them with them, please let me know. But within those reports, we've got information on people's knowledge about the ocean, but crucially their emotional connection to the ocean, what they care about, what they're worried about, how they spend time in coastal spaces around the UK, how they get there, what kind of things they do. So we're trying to really bring in that diversity across those different ocean literacy dimensions. In Wales, we took that work pretty quickly to start thinking about what ocean literacy meant in a Welsh context. And we've been working over the last 2 years through the Welsh Coast and Seas Partnership to develop, well, nearly 3 years actually, but to develop an ocean literacy strategy for Wales. So this was really driven by first that international emphasis on ocean literacy that was coming through the Ocean Decade, but also as a result of ocean literacy being identified as a key priority for the Wales Coast and Seas Partnership, which is a government-supported, ministerial appointed group now. So for the last nearly 3 years, we've been working collaboratively, bringing together a fantastic range of organisations representing academia, consultants, NGOs, coastal partnerships, lots of different groups to really try to co-design and think about what ocean literacy might mean, and that's resulted in the establishment of the Welsh Ocean Literacy Coalition. We've been working to develop a more NE, so the Welsh Ocean Literacy Strategy, and to really ensure that it was a very co-designed, collaborative process, meant that we had to take time to work together to develop first a vision and a strategy for what building ocean literacy in Wales might mean, how that could take account of the Welsh context, and very much aligning that with things like the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act in Wales, and with other kind of national priorities, and really starting to build that base of champions and that network of practice, and that's been done through the coalition. In January of this year, we launched a More NE, which was launched on the 8th of January. I don't think that QR code works, so I will download the strategy for you and send it around. But a More NE is very much a culmination of 2.5 years of work, of community work, to bring together something that is really Welsh specific, and really amazingly, it is only the second national strategy globally. So the first in Europe, the first in the UK, and only the second in the world. We co-designed 6 key action areas, so very much taking direction and guidance from the approach that Canada took. They have 9 action areas. We co-designed 6 action areas as being of most relevance for Wales, and aligned those with those 10 dimensions of ocean literacy. That work has meant that we've got things around access and experience, ensuring that we have ocean literate policy. So again, moving away from the idea that ocean literacy is only about schools and about general society. It is about ensuring that our decision-making institutions, our policies, both within and outside ocean and coastal issues, are ocean literate. Communities and culture is really key, and we worked really hard to ensure that in Moroni the strategy was translatable in both languages, in both English and Welsh. Within the action areas, we have outcomes and objectives and suggested ideas of how activities across the country can be used to deliver and support delivery and implementation of Moroni. Crucially, this isn't owned by any one organisation. It is very much a collective, and we've been working really hard together with Natural Resources Wales, with Welsh Government, with the North Wales Wildlife Trust, the Marine Conservation Society, and a number of other groups to really start to implement the actions that are outlined in the strategy, and it's very much a continuing work in progress. Alongside that, through the Diverse Marine Values Project, we have some funding in our final and our fourth year to start the process of co-developing an ocean literacy strategy for England. So Diverse Marine Values has been a project, as I said, running through the SMMR programme, really looking at the way we can use different methods. So really drawing on arts-based methodologies, social sciences, lots of different approaches to understanding the diversity of relationships and values that coastal communities might have towards the marine and coastal environment around the UK. Very specifically for year 4, I'm working on the development of the ocean literacy strategy for England. So not a small task in the next few months. And over February and March, we ran 4 workshops exploring a range of topics to start that co-design process. So what does an ocean literate England look like? What is the vision for the future? What activities and ocean literacy initiatives already exist? What are the geographical and thematic gaps that might be happening? And that's a QR code to fill out the survey for that. And again, I can send these round if they're useful. And then what are the challenges and priority next steps? Who's missing? What do we need to do to actually work together to support ocean literacy in England? And how can that be used to develop and co-design an ocean literacy strategy? And between the 2 online sessions that we had and then the 2 in-person meetings, we had over 120 people come to the workshops in February and March, and more who expressed an interest in attending but weren't available. So really fantastic to see so many organisations and so many people, including those cross-border, who want to be involved in the co-design of this process. It's ongoing. I'm currently typing up and working through all the millions of post-its you can see on the screen down there, and that's only a tiny fraction of them. So if it's something you're keen to be involved in going forward, then please do get in touch with me. I'd be really happy to link you into the next steps. Some of the early themes that came from those initial workshops have been a real call for a better understanding of how ocean literacy can be used as a meaningful policy tool in England, what the enablers and barriers for ocean literacy initiatives and operationalising ocean literacy might be, really centering inclusivity, equity and accessibility, and ensuring that includes communities across the spectrum, including inland communities, but not forgetting that actually we shouldn't assume that coastal communities have access to their marine and coastal spaces. We can't make those assumptions. A focus on whole society and empowerment were also really key and kind of recurring themes that came through the discussions at the workshops. So just in closing, the next steps and the kind of ongoing process for this work is to keep reviewing and analysing all the workshop feedback and start to bring all of that together and start to begin that drafting process of the ocean literacy strategy for England. The next step really will be to report back to the community, so all those people who came to the first phase of workshops, and to many of you, if you would like to come to this next set of workshops. I'm planning for some online feedback sessions and kind of meetings in July. And then there'll be some further in-person workshops later in the year, most likely in October, because September is already absolutely bonkers. Here in Wales, we're working really hard to continue delivery of Moroni in Wales, and we've been working to develop and co-develop a collaborative funding proposal so that we can really start to implement some of the actions within the action plan. And I think there's still some work to do to think about how we can bring all of these things together across the UK. Scottish Wildlife Trust are currently developing or starting the process of developing an ocean literacy strategy for England, for Scotland. So I think there's some more work to do to think about how we can work to ensure we're working collaboratively and cross-border in the UK, and also how ocean literacy can perhaps be useful as a concept for the work that's happening through the REX projects, and for me specifically through the work I'm doing through TRACK. So thank you very much. I hope there's time for questions, and I'm very happy to share slides afterwards as well.
Thank you, Emma. That was great. Another fantastic presentation, and lots of information there. Really, it's good coverage, I think, of what ocean literacy is about, and I'm sure helped everybody understand what you're doing. It's a really great example, I think, also of sort of co-developing something with a large number of stakeholders. It takes a little bit of time. Oh no, but somebody has posted a Q&A. Somebody just asking probably an easy question for you to answer. Where is it possible to find the other 50 points underpinning the 7 principles of ocean literacy?
I can put a link into my slides when I send them around to make sure you've got access to those. Yeah, no problem.
Okay, yeah. we can do that. That's great. Thanks. I was just going to ask, I mean, there was an awful lot of work sort of bringing people together there, but what do you think really is the biggest challenge of getting ocean literacy adopted? There's a lot of work gone into making something there, particularly in Wales. You've obviously made a lot of progress, but I guess what do you think is the challenge to make it, to get everybody doing it, so to speak?
Yeah, I actually did some work on this through the Diverse Values Project, where I did a series of interviews with a number of the kind of decision-making organisations in across the UK, and really asked questions about, you know, how we operationalise ocean literacy, pretty much mainly from a policy perspective, but still from an implementation perspective more generally. And I think there are a few things. I think the language around literacy is a challenge. I think people see it as being about education and reading and writing, and that makes people think, it can make some sectors and some organisations think this isn't for me, it's about education. And the concept has evolved, and believe me when I say that the issue around the language and the terminology comes up in absolutely every single meeting we have on ocean literacy. But I do think that is a genuine challenge. Funding is obviously a challenge always. I do think it's trying to go beyond the usual suspects. I mean, if we want ocean literacy as a concept to have meaningful impact, it needs to be as commonplace as recycling and putting our seatbelts on. You know, it needs to be embracing and engaging with people outside the ocean bubble. And because we know we need to do this, we know that it's important, and we need to be bringing in businesses and local authorities, and there are some really great examples of that starting to happen. So the Motion for the Ocean initiative is a really great way of bringing local authorities and councils into the conversation around what ocean literacy can mean at a place-based level. So I think we're seeing stuff happen. It's just taken us 20 years to get here.
That's great, and I think that sort of in part answers that. There was a couple of good questions just came up, but we are running short of time, and that, I think, sort of thinking about how to get it implemented. There's a couple of questions about how can you do it sort of on a local scale, and how do we get minority groups and everyone sort of involved in it. And I think your answer there was sort of starting to address that, but you can obviously add some more into the Q&A chat for those people that have asked those questions. So I'm just going to finish things up to try and keep it almost on time for everybody. Really big thank you for everyone to join us. There's been a lot of people on the call. It's really great that everybody came along. I just want to give a final quick push for the next one, which will be happening on the 11th of June. So Wednesday again at 2 to 3 p.m. And that's going to be, we're holding that jointly with the LGA Coastal Special Interest Group. And it'll be a number of speakers from the IPACT project network that are going to be talking to us about work that they've been doing. So there's more details about that on the newsletter, and you can obviously sign up via the newsletter and also via the website for all of the webinars. But once again, I'd just like to say thank you to Marta, to Elina, and to Emma for excellent presentations. It's been really good, and so good to see so many people here for the first of these webinars. And thank you everyone for joining us.